Haliburton double team, shot clock at 4. Nembhard's got to put it up. Step back, his three-pointer. Bang! Nembhard knocks the three down.
The Indiana Pacers are back in the Eastern Conference Finals, so today I thought we'd take a look at how this team was put together. Indiana's always had a reputation as a basketball state. I don't know if it's because Larry Bird and Oscar Robertson are there, the movie Hoosiers, or what it is, but they've always had that reputation. The Pacers have been a part of the NBA since 1976, but before this they were part of the ABA and won 3 championships in the early 70s there. Pacers had some of the best players from this ABA era, with guys like Mel Daniels and George McGinnis leading the way for some of their championships. But after the ABA-NBA merger in 1976, the Pacers wouldn't have much success in their early years in the NBA. They would only make the playoffs once in their first 11 seasons and wouldn't have any big-name stars until they got Chuck Person in 1986, and then they got their franchise's best player in 1987 when they drafted Reggie Miller out of UCLA. Over his 18-year career, all with Indiana, Reggie Miller gave lots of great moments to Pacers fans. From his iconic moments in those Knicks series, arguing with Spike Lee, to taking them to their only NBA Finals in 2000. Unfortunately for the Pacers, they would fall short to the Lakers that year, but they did have some good teams with Reggie, pairing him up with guys like Rick Smits, Mark Jackson, Jalen Rose, and in the later years, guys like Jermaine O'Neal, Ron Artest, Steven Jackson. Once Reggie retired in 2005, the Pacers still had some talented players on their roster. They had a transitional period where Jermaine O'Neal was the best player. There were a few Danny Granger years in there, but the decade after he left wasn't all that successful. Until the early 2010s, when the Pacers assembled a new young core that could contend in the East. Their best player was Paul George, who was one of the most promising young players at the time, seeming like a guy that could maybe challenge LeBron in the East when there weren't a whole lot of other great players at the time. They also had 2 pretty decent big men for the time. They drafted Roy Hibbert out of Georgetown and had an all-star in David West playing power forward for them. Unfortunately for the Pacers, this was the time when LeBron was at the height of his powers, and they would lose conference finals to him and the Heat in 2013 and 2014. The Pacers team definitely had some spunk and seemed like the best competition for the Heatles at the time, but even Lance Stevenson trying to throw LeBron off his game didn't work, and they would come up short both times. After losing the conference finals in 2014, the Pacers would suffer another setback. While playing in a USA team basketball scrimmage, Paul George would break his leg and be out for quite some time. When this happened, there were some questions whether Paul George would ever fully recover and get back to the level that he was playing at before the injury. He missed most of the 2014 and 2015 season. This would be the last season for Roy Hibbert and David West as members of the Pacers. They would actually miss the playoffs this year after going to the conference finals the year before. This was kind of the new era of small ball in the NBA when Steph Curry won his first title, and it kind of moved out the way the Pacers were playing with more big guys like Roy Hibbert. But fortunately for the Pacers, Paul George would return this year. He only played in 6 games, but still a big accomplishment for him coming back off of that gruesome leg injury. After getting rid of West and Hibbert and having Paul George return from a major injury, the Pacers would enter into a little bit of a rebuilding period. The Pacers would select Miles Turner with the 11th pick in the 2015 draft. Turner was the number 2 player in his high school class and showed a lot of promise at Texas, being a long, lanky guy that could shoot threes and also defend the rim. Paul George would return to form in the 2015-2016 season, once again being named to an all-star team. But he didn't have a whole lot of help on this team, and the Pacers would lose in 7 games to the Toronto Raptors in the first round of the playoffs. In the 2016 offseason, the Pacers would trade a couple draft picks to acquire Thaddeus Young in an attempt to give Paul George some help. This wouldn't end up working out for them though, as they would match up with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round, once again meet up with LeBron James, and this time get swept in the opening round series. This would end up being Paul George's last season as an Indiana Pacer, as they would trade him to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. This ended up being a pretty good trade for the Pacers, It's not often that you get two really good players back in a trade for your superstar. Both Victor Oladipo and Sabonis would go on to have all-star seasons as members of the Pacers. In the 2017-2018 season, Oladipo would not only be named to the All-Star team, but also win Most Improved Player. The Pacers would once again match up with the Cavaliers in the first round of the playoffs. This time though, it was a rather competitive series, as they took the future Eastern Conference champs to 7 games in the opening round. Heading into the 2018-2019 season, things were looking up for the Pacers. However, for the second time that decade, the Indiana Pacers star player would go out with a serious injury. Oladipo would get hurt, and unlike Paul George, his career never fully recovered from this. With Oladipo's uncertain status in the 2019 offseason, the Pacers decided to bring in 2 guards in free agency. They signed TJ McConnell from the Philadelphia 76ers, and they signed restricted free agent Malcolm Brogdon from the Milwaukee Bucks. The Pacers would get back to the 4 seed in the East this year, but it was a little bit of an odd year, being that it was the 2020 COVID season. You had the bubble, and where TJ Warren became the best player in the world for about a 2-week stretch. In the first 5 games, he was averaging 39 points per game. That cooled down a little bit as he finished the bubble averaging around 26. But I still think bubble TJ Warren should be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying his whole career, just that 10-game stretch in the bubble. The Pacers wouldn't have a first-round pick in the 2020 draft, but amazingly enough, they would end up with 4 players from the lottery within the next 3 years. In the 2020-2021 season, the Pacers wouldn't make any major changes to their roster. Sabonis would continue to be their best player, and he would make his second straight All-Star appearance with the Pacers during this stretch. Even with Sabonis' improvement, the Pacers would miss out on the playoffs. They would finish as the 9th seed after being knocked out by the Washington Wizards in the play-in. In the 2021 offseason, the Pacers would select Isaiah Jackson out of Kentucky with the 22nd pick. It wouldn't be until mid-year, though, that they would shake up their team drastically when they would trade their all-star player, Sabonis, to the Kings for Tyrese Haliburton and Buddy Hield. Ever since this trade happened 2.5 years ago, people have been debating who won this trade, but honestly, it ended up being one of those trades where both teams won. The Kings were able to make the playoffs with Sabonis, and he fit perfectly alongside De'Aaron Fox when they had the problem of matching Fox and Haliburton both in that backcourt, and the Pacers got their future all-star point guard to command their fast-paced moving offense. In the 2022 draft, the Pacers would select Benedict Mathurin of Arizona with the 7th pick. They also had the 31st pick in that draft, and they would use that to draft Andrew Nembhard out of Gonzaga. They paired up these 2 rookies to create a pretty good rookie class, with 2 guys contributing right away. In free agency, they actually tried to sign DeAndre Ayton away from the Suns, but Phoenix would match his offer sheet, him being a restricted free agent, and they brought him back for 4 years, $133. Looking back on this 2 years later, the Pacers probably dodged a bullet by Phoenix matching his contract. It seemed like this offseason, the Pacers were prioritizing acquiring young talent. They would trade one of their better players away in Malcolm Brogdon for a deal that included a few players, but the most impactful player from this deal would be Aaron Nesmith. Haliburton will continue to improve this year, starting to show that he was this promising young player that was worth giving Sabonis up for. Pacers would miss the playoffs for the 3rd straight year, but their rookie Benedict Mathurin would finish 4th in Rookie of the Year voting, and with him and Haliburton, it showed like things were on the up for the Pacers. This brings us to the current year, 2023-2024. The Pacers will continue to prioritize acquiring young talent, as they would have 2 first-round picks. They would select Jarace Walker and Ben Shepherd with their 2 first-round picks. Walker wouldn't end up playing much throughout the year, but Shepherd would prove to be an important role player for the Pacers. They would also sign Bruce Brown away from the defending champion Denver Nuggets. They would give Brown a huge 2-year, $50 million contract. A lot of people thought it was an overpay for a guy that was mostly in a role player role. They would also trade for Obi Toppin and get their 4th player from that lottery in 2020. If you're counting at home, it was Toppin, Tyrese Haliburton, Jalen Smith, and Aaron Nesmith from that 2020 lottery. The Pacers would break out in mid-season. In the inaugural NBA in-season tournament, they would be the surprise team, winning the East, taking out teams like the Celtics and the Bucks, making it to the in-season tournament finals, where they would come up short against LeBron and the Lakers. However, after the in-season tournament, maybe because they saw what this team was capable of, the Pacers would push their chips in and acquire Pascal Siakam. They would use Bruce Brown's contract and a few draft picks to make the deal work, and Siakam, a former NBA champion with the Toronto Raptors, joined the Pacers core. Indiana wouldn't improve a whole lot record-wise after the Siakam trade, but they were also dealing with Tyrese Haliburton and a nagging injury that plagued him throughout the second half of the season. Even though the Pacers would finish with the 6th seed and match up with the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. The Bucks had bad injury luck with Giannis being out, and even Damian Lillard missed a couple games in this series, allowing the Pacers to take it in 6 games. In the next round, the Pacers would face another injured team, as they would be matched up with the New York Knicks without Julius Randle and with a few other players dealing with injuries. But the Pacers still had to go out there and play, so credit to them. They would take out the Knicks in 7 games, even winning a Game 7 in MSG when a lot of people thought this team was too young and not ready yet. In the year of 2024, where lots of teams prioritized just landing big stars and paying 3 or 4 players all the team's salary cap, the Pacers have built their roster in a different way. They have their 2 max guys in Haliburton and Pascal Siakam, but they also have a very deep roster. They have 8, 9, 10 quality players that can play on a nightly basis. They're a very fast-paced team, so this serves them well to have the depth to be able to play lots of guys when they're running and playing that fast-paced action. They've drafted well without having a lot of top 10 picks. A lot of these guys that they've drafted have been in the teens, 20s, and even in the second round with someone like Nembhard. They've also given guys second chances that maybe didn't work out on their first teams, like Aaron Nesmith, Jalen Smith, TJ McConnell, signing him away from the Sixers in free agency. Now they're back in the conference finals against the Boston Celtics. It's hard to tell whether this Pacers team is going to be a legit contender or if they're like some of the teams we've seen in recent years get to the conference finals, like the 21 Hawks or the Blazers that one year with Damian Lillard against the Warriors. It may be too soon to tell, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Is this Pacers team a legit contender, or is this a one-year wonder where everything lined up for them with injuries and seeding? Thanks for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and see you guys next time.